All right, peeps, welcome to Borrow from the Best. Today I'm stoked because we're going to be talking to the entrepreneurs, right? And a little bit to the companies about how can we get smart, right? How do we get smart with the way that we are not only managing our energy collectively within the ecosystem, but also individually to own our time, our talents, and maximize our impact. So I brought two experts today, Carrie and Craig. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Hey, thanks a lot for having us. We appreciate it. We love the topic. We love the concept of intrapreneur. We felt like we've lived that
Yes.
very much a part of our lives, and we're definitely excited for the discussion for sure.
So great. Yeah. So in a few sentences, would you tell us who you two are and how you use your talents right now?
Why don't you kick us off, Carrie? I usually do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. So I'm Carrie. We're actually based out of the Madison area. And we have been entrepreneurs for well over a decade plus, probably combined 30 years. And we've been co-business owners for many different businesses at this point. And I started as liberal studies college student, went into preschool teaching, but just that real gut check very young of like, okay, here's my vision, here's the track that I'm on, and they don't really have an intersection.
Mm.
And just realizing that there's like a fulfillment gap for me and so many people. So I wasn't hardcore. I was more of like a moderate entrepreneur and took like a baby step into entrepreneurship through leveraging a side hustle initially. And that's actually how I met Craig. So it's kind of love story meets entrepreneurship. But it's been a huge blessing. I was able to step out of my teaching career altogether in my mid 20s, really focus on coaching, empowering other people, doing a lot of public speaking, and now authors, podcast hosts, and nonprofit owners. So we definitely keep busy, but it's all by choice and things that we're passionate about because we created that time and that choice and empowerment to be able to do so. So it's been a fun adventure.
yeah,
Yes, and
and
really passionate about the side hustle, right? Because you both had experienced that.
Yeah, we've lived it big time. We lived it. We teach it. We're all about it. Wrote a book about it specifically, so it's definitely our bread and butter.
yeah. So I have a background in more corporate finance. I worked for G Capital, Deutsche Bank, BMO Harris Bank, doing it's in the end commercial banking, and just realized early on like I did not want to work for someone else forever.
Yeah.
Right. And the bottom line is we all diversify our investments, but nobody taught me to diversify my income streams,
Mm.
which is ridiculous. It's like, why would you have one way to make money? It doesn't make sense in the 21st century. So the challenge for me early on is I didn't have much money. I didn't have much expertise. I didn't have much credibility, but I was teachable and I was willing to work hard. And so as a function of that, we kind of dialed into some people who were already authentically successful, who'd built side hustles successfully. We followed them through the wormhole, as I like to say. And several years, a decade later, for me, I was able to step away and replace my commercial banking career. And I think the last 2 years at BMO, we banked 120% of my salary because we had the side hustles built up to a point where we were just cash heavy. And
Mm.
that allowed us not just to create entrepreneurship or business for business's sake, but to use it as a tool to create a quality life.
Mm.
And I think that's where a lot of people go astray is like we get into the entrepreneurial game and throw out the relationship, we throw out, health and all these things get tossed. And it's like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose to begin with. So it was hard. We worked super long hours. And when you're burning the candle at both ends, that is the game. That's fair. Hustle, Carrie likes to say side hustle being the optimal word. But we're super thankful and we've been rewarded and now have that autonomy that we really sought out to be with our kids and to control our day is like the most amazing thing. And it's
Yeah.
awesome to be here with you I mean, I would much rather be doing this as much as I love finance. I would so much rather be with you on this call, have a chance at impacting somebody's life than, crunching numbers that eventually AI is going to be able to take down without me. So
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think you hit on something when I heard you say, Craig, like this desire for something different, right? At the time you
mm,
were saying like, I don't really know if I want to be working for somebody else my whole life, right? I think
mm,
when I talk to people and I talk to hundreds and thousands of people who are saying, I don't really know if this is what I should be doing, right? There's two questions they ask me. Is this really what I should be doing? And if so, what should I be doing next, right? And they're just sort of waiting for the answer to come to them. And that
mm,
passive, excuse me, that passive response is, I just think it's never going to get you there. I rarely see that working, right? If we are expecting our boss or our employer to fulfill us and to hand us this golden
Yes.
career on a silver platter. It's
Yes.
it's just like expecting your life partner to be the one that keeps you happy. That's not their
Yes.
job, right? Their
Yes.
job is to keep themselves happy. Your boss's job is to do their job and run the company. So you have to take control over that. So I'm definitely hearing, this claiming of I own my time, talents, and my voice. And no
Mhm.
matter what I want to do, if I want to work for someone else or I want to work for myself, I have to own the steps to get there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would go as far to say extreme ownership. And
Mhm.
it's this reality I had where I realized, okay, the world wants me to be successful. Like I have that deeper belief. The world is not out to get me. However, I have to claim my stake and like create my success in the world and find my path and fumble a little bit and figure it out because it's never just going to land in my lap. The right mentors probably don't live in my house or in my neighborhood. I'm going
Yes.
to have to go and do some networking, do some things that are very uncomfortable. I mean, coming from a teaching background, basically a college student at that point, and dropping me in a networking context with high-end professionals and business owners was so uncomfortable. But it was like the long-term vision was worth all the pains and the growing struggles and everything. So really beginning with that end in mind, we call it the life vision, because once you've identified like how you want to live, what type of
Yes.
person do you want to become, what type of autonomy and choices do you want, then it's way less about the what, and it's more about who do I know that's genuinely and authentically actually created that life, and how do I find them, stalk them, do weird things to get their time and tap into their thought process and really work to emulate and duplicate a track that's actually already likely been created by somebody. You just might not know them yet. And that takes work and intention. So we're big believers in like people go straight to the what because that's what society teaches us. Like, what do you want to be when you want to grow up, 8-year-old? And you're like, I don't know. I like numbers. Like my friend said, I'm good at math.
Yeah.
Okay, be an accountant. And it's tough because when you operate your life like that, in so many ways, those choices become like everything becomes a consequence of that. Like becoming a
Yes.
teacher, I love children, which is why I went into teaching. But I also didn't really factor in early on that I was going to have to work 8 to 4, that I couldn't like really call my own shots. There was a lot of infrastructure already in place. I wasn't going to get to public speak and be challenged in other ways outside of like the limitations of the job role. I worked at a preschool, so I wasn't having my summers off. It's all these things that when you really dig deep and think about what the actual life vision is and what you want long term, oftentimes there's just not a lot of overlap. And I think that's where focusing so much more on the who gets people a lot closer to where they want to be if they're open minded and flexible in the mediums they're using to create it. So that's also a pretty important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say, Carrie, that when you say look for the who can help you further define more of like that why, the what is it really that you want? Because I feel like it's the onion, right? We have to use the 5 why process. Like, I want this. Like somebody might say, Craig, like you, like, I don't ever want to work for anybody again. But why? Right. And if
Mhm.
we really start peeling it back, we might be able to identify in there that like 3 layers down, it's because you have a really crappy boss right now and you feel like you don't want to work for an a-hole again, right?
Mhm.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily want to stay in house, but you're trying to whittle this back and peel it back. So when you start to look for who, like, oh, I like that, or I don't like that,
Mhm.
that's going to get you closer to maybe this purpose or this why.
Yeah, I think it's all exploration in so
Yeah.
many ways. I don't think when you're 18 or 22 you should just know everything you want in the world. I think that takes time and it's an evolution. So getting around people who've done good things and they're 10 times further along on the path than you, it just opens up one's mind to important questions to start asking ourselves. And it does take time. And I think that's where people get tripped up. It's like, I don't know exactly what my 10-year life vision is, so I'm not going to start to create it at all. But starting to build on that, and even starting with your values, what do you actually value? And
Mm.
for me, adventure, we family, impact, adventure, those are like our 3 Tandem Consulting values. Being a teacher, I just didn't have that sense of adventure every day that was so high on my priority list. So really entrepreneurship became one of the best mediums to really create that type of life.
Yeah. Right. And as you're building that, I'm interested, Craig, even for you, because you stayed longer in-house.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to kind of go back to the
In-house. I
people who
like
are
that phrase.
in-house
Yeah. Yeah.
thinking, right? I was kind of say like in-house, out of house. I mean, you can go back and forth, right? Many people do. But
Mhm.
because you spent longer in-house, and Carrie, you could certainly weigh in too. But talk to me, tell me what you think about this advice that I give out. So I'll coach people, and it's a smaller part of my practice coaching. I usually work with the companies, but for right now I'm dealing with somebody who has been in the workforce for almost 40 years,
Mhm.
many of those at one company, and is finally admitting to themselves that they want something more.
Yep.
And I always say, even to that person, double down, start where you're at, because you technically you get paid to grow and learn. So you have
Mhm.
this playground where you might as well start there and see how much you could squeeze out of this lemon until
Mhm.
you decide, and not in a bad way, lemon, right? But lemonade,
Mhm.
not, until you decide to go somewhere else. So what do you feel like that advice? Yes, no, like middle of
Oh,
the road?
okay. This is so going to be such a great discussion. Yes. One, how do we, what's more than 1,000,000%? Yes.
Yeah.
So to your point in the beginning, people are trying to make their job complete them. They
Right.
want the perfect pay. They want all this flexibility. They want to be passionate about the work. They want the company to have meaning. And it's like, it's just not realistic. It's like asking your spouse to complete you. Same thing you're saying. I'm just using the word complete because that's from the, pop culture, right? Or it used to be at least cool. So here's the reality. When you start a side hustle, what it does, it gives you an outlet for other things that you have creative energy for, you have interest in. And now you don't have to put as much pressure on your job. And then what happens is you start developing skills. As a risk analyst, I was not developing marketing, sales, and public speaking skills. But in my side hustle, I was. And then
Mm,
as a function of that, I got moved into a business development role. I was managing like a $150 million portfolio with General Electric, not because I was the smartest or had the most experience, but because I developed the skills with a side hustle. Now, that in turn creates a better ecosystem, to your point, for the firm itself.
mhm.
Because now, like, I literally had years where I was like, I don't care if I get a raise. I just want more time off so I can build my side hustle harder.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't, like, you want to pay me 110 or 120? Like, it's irrelevant to me because I make 30, 40 in my side hustles, or
Mhm.
50, or whatever that eventually came to be. And so many people are like, um, having one tool and one skill in today's economy is not wise.
Yep.
You are more dynamic than your job title. That's just the bottom line. And so the job title comes with a bucket, and it comes with these restrictions in a box. And therefore, you're going to feel frustrated because you're a human being. And that's the game, right? And so then it's like, well, how do I get more money? It's like, no, don't bid. I told so many people this, and this is kind of maybe your point. Don't put 50 hours a week in. Put in 45 and take 5 and go build something else for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what to build a brand for yourself because you already have one, and you might as well figure out how to sharpen it. Social media is a great tool to get you to sharpen it, because if nobody likes your stuff and you're trying to be authentic,
Yeah.
you're not influencing. So it's a great way to improve. But those are a couple of the things. So I mean, I have a list of bullet points of things of like why entrepreneurship is a super good idea for the individual, but also for the firm itself. So we can go deeper on that or not, but 1,000,000% on your advice. Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to go deeper on that, but let me wrap this one up because I want to
Yeah.
tie this back to the who and inside.
Sure. Yeah.
So do you feel like it's realistic for both of you? So think back when you were internally and how you navigated as entrepreneurs at that point, right? Because
Mhm.
preneur, right? You were just in-house trying to leverage your natural time and strengths and talents, and now you're leveraging them on your own. So when you were in-house and you thought about that who, with my advice of double down, do you feel like it's fair to say, don't just think about who externally to your company, try to see if there's people internally that you can connect to and learn from and expand from, because again, you're already getting paid to do that. And if you can add even more value, if it can be a yes and, then it's
Mhm.
amazing, right?
Yes.
But that's not always easy for people to do internally. So did either of you sort of maximize that internal space? And Craig, you mentioned maybe getting some opportunities. Were you initiating those? Were you talking about these new skills? How did you go
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So one of the best things that I learned how to do in the corporate world was to like own it. Like if
Mm,
you have a portfolio, you freaking own it. If you have a
yeah.
relationship with a client, you own it. It's not about like, okay, boss, what do I do next? It's like, no, you take ownership. You get the ball as far down the field as you possibly can. And then you say, hey, look, I'm at the 10-yard line, but just use the football metaphor. Like, I don't know how I'm having trouble getting in the end zone. Like, this is what I've tried. What do you recommend? And then they give you advice and you own it as much as you can. And, the better you can do that, then the better you'll be as an intra or entre or extra or whateverpreneur, right? So, so that's my big advice for people. So yeah, own your learning. I think that's where people sort of like, well, no one taught me that. I'm not getting training on it. Well, dude, there's probably a million YouTube videos you can watch. And if your boss comes over and sees you on YouTube, say, hey, I'm watching training here on how to close a deal or how to better analyze a spreadsheet. And he'll be like, okay.
And then share those learnings back with your team, right?
Heck
You
yeah.
start it. You start it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that we talk a lot about, this goes a little deeper into the strategy, but like learning, and I learned this from a friend of mine who's really successful in corporate America, learn what your boss's goals are and learn how to support your boss's goals, because then they become your ally. And then you need less time with them. You need less support because they know you're on their team and you're trying to help them get where they want to go. And then they'll in turn pour back to you. And if you can do that a couple levels up, like in General Electric, there was like 18,000 levels between me and the ivory tower.
Yes.
So there were 7 actually, and 4 of them were named Jeff at one point, which is
Oh,
funny.
Jeff.
Like Jeff ML, yeah. But anyways, I actually worked there then. So, but yeah, like the more you can like play into that, then you'll get access to those people. And yeah, I mean, I want to learn from as many people as I could, and I still have some excellent bosses I've had.
Yeah, you built great relationships in your field. And I think it's important to note, like, the goal isn't skimping on your career or on your duties. It's smoke it and be more efficient, be more effective, carry more leadership into your role. And I think you were like a shining example of, performing at the top of his role across the companies he worked for. And also having, that unity
butt,
in a
dude.
sense, right, with his employer, and they knew they could count on him because he would perform.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, I don't know. I'm waiting to get my copy from Amazon of So You Think You Can tell me. I almost said So You Think You Could Dance, which by the way, used to be one of my favorite shows on TV. But the title of the book is So You Want
cooperatively there. Yeah.
That'll be the sequel.
Yeah, I know you started typing So You Want a Side, whatever, or So You Want to Do This, and all sorts of crazy stuff comes up. It's like, oh boy, I better not click on that link.
That's totally true. But no, it's so you want to start a side hustle. But is there something in there that sort of acknowledges what you were saying, Carrie, of, I call it the yes end. If you are going to choose to have a side hustle or anything else on your passion patchwork, right? So I like to vision it as like my grandma's quilt, all these different squares of different sizes and colors and textures. If you have more than one square, which I hope you do, hobbies, families, side hustle, core job. So with this passion patchwork, right, you have all these squares, but it's not just one. So for me, I always say it's a yes and. If you choose to have a side hustle on there and you're inside a company, you got to kill it on that day job, right? So even as me as an entrepreneur, many years I didn't have the side hustle, but technically I kind of did inside, right? Where I was like, I'm going to do my day job and then I'm going to go work on that special IT project, even though I worked in HR, because I wanted in. I wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to have this bigger picture. So regardless if you're trying to balance a yes and internally or externally, I feel like it's got to be both.
Yeah, and actually we have a huge section in our book on how to manage your job and build a business, because that's what differentiates all the content about entrepreneurship compared to content specifically curated for a side hustler.
Yeah.
That's what's so unique about the struggle and the victory is you gotta perform at a 40, 50, 60-hour work week and do well in your job, and also potentially maintain a family or other life relationships, and meanwhile figure out how to build a business. Those are a lot of big things. So we really zoom in on that side of the journey.
We call that like life set, essentially, right? So if mindset is your way of living, then life set is like how you apply it, right? You're living in your choices. And so a lot of people will read this amazing content and quote, Shakespearean entrepreneurs, like sounds so brilliant, but then you look at their life and they're broke or busted or whatever. And it's so you have to have a good life set. And 2 of the big pillars of that is, your finances and your relationships and your career. And so to be able to handle that, you've got to have a good foundation. And as soon as you get shaky in your job, what happens is your side hustle goes to the back burner real fast. And so that people mess it up. So yeah, we can give some more specific tips about like how to succeed in both simultaneously. But it's so critical, and to be able to balance them is where you were going, right?
Yeah,
Do you want to add that?
absolutely.
So talk to me guys about that. When you think about what makes people be able to be successful at the yes end, because some people do that for years, right? And stay that
Mhm.
way, or some people decide to try to give it try to go outside. But what is the key to being able to balance it? What are some of those tips that you have, Craig and Carrie?
Yeah. Do you want me to start on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can kick off. One of the big ones is being a performer in your job role, but
Okay.
also being protective of your time. And knowing that maybe the extra 10K, like Craig gave as an example, or getting pulled in to work 50 hours versus 45, those 5 hours compared to your coworker who maybe isn't trying to scale a business outside of their 9 to 5, it just means something different to you. That opportunity cost on those hours is really, really different. So learning how to perform and be efficient, so you can do 50 hours of work in 40 and then go take that extra 10 hours and go slay in your side business.
So
Yeah.
performing, what would you add, Craig?
A dozen things, but that's like the main theme, right? So if you get
Yeah.
really specific, don't waste time at the water coolers of America,
Mm,
right? Like so much time is burned complaining about the other part of that is not complaining, right? So much time is spent complaining about things you have no control over. I mean, what was I going to change at General Electric? Like not that much. So I can get upset about this. The GE averaged when I was there buying or selling a company once every 3 days. So there was constant sense of chaos,
yeah.
essentially. And so you can't control all those things. And like I'm fine to have basic conversations with my coworkers, but I just didn't become best friends with a lot of my coworkers because I didn't go to lunch with my coworkers because I took that time and built a side hustle.
Mhm.
And like some people don't have that discipline or whatnot. And that's okay. Like you can do that, but then just realize Carrie said this, but it's not that your life is more valuable than theirs, but your opportunity cost on your time is more valuable because you're not going to take that time and go get a burrito. You're going to take that time and go get wealthy and build
Yeah.
something for yourself.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, though, now you're not eating away at your company time. So one thing you do not want to do is like be on company time and building your side hustle. Not cool, not a lot of integrity. Don't do that. Having said that, the faster you can perform your job, keep your customers or clients or the portfolio or whatever your job is, then the boss will come to trust you more and give you more slack on the line. And so what I found is if I know my boss's goals and I come in and I rock it, then and he's happy and my clients are happy, like what's the problem here, right? And
Yes.
so if you're able to do those things, that's some of the top stuff. And then as you develop new skills, you should be able to bring that to your job,
Right.
and not in a fanciful, like braggadocious way, but in like a smart, strategic way. And if you get comfortable public speaking or marketing or sales, or you get better comfort on financial statements or whatever it is you're studying for the side hustle or growing, bring that to the job in a respectful way, and people will see you. The other huge benefit, and this is more of a benefit, but is I became less fearful in the corporate world
Yes.
because it wasn't my only game. And so now I didn't want to lose my job, but it's like when you make 100 grand and you have 50K coming in on the side, you operate differently.
Mhm.
You speak your mind more frequently. You
Mhm.
go right to the point. You don't want to waste your time in a meeting either. And so you don't run a meeting that wastes time. And so what happens is you become less fearful. And then your boss senses that. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't control this person. Right. But then it creates an environment that's very win-win, in my opinion, because now no one, people aren't operating out of fear.
Yeah.
Like, you want to let me go, because like I'm fine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a huge benefit. And I think that kicks benefits back to the employer, which we can talk about. But I think new skills, less fear, and realizing that you're more dynamic, bringing those skills back to the job are all great. I'm trying to think of a couple other like tips for the job, specifically how to succeed in both, because we have a lot of them. But those are the top couple that came to my mind.
I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, Craig, just a little bit
Yeah.
more on that fear because,
Yeah.
I'm hearing maybe there's a leader out there because look, I was in corporate America for 19 years, big
Mhm.
companies to small companies, and a lot of leaders, right? Because that's who I deal with. A lot of leaders suck, right? They just do, right? So you can look at the statistics, 7 out of 8 are never going to be great leaders,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
7 out of 10 won't be good leaders. 1 out of 10 was
Wow.
born a good leader, and 1 out of 10, maybe you could improve, right? And then you've got like one who's in the middle. It's not a great landscape because I think they're pulled in a lot of different directions. So not to get too far down on the leader, but I'm hearing a leader on here going, oh my God, I don't want these people to be out of control, right? But you do. You
Mm.
actually do from a cultural perspective, from a performance perspective, and a humanity perspective, which by the way, our talent's going to start demanding more of. We actually
Mm-hmm.
do want a culture where people are owning, and we walk with what I say a little bit more swagger to our step, and not in a braggart way, but in a, I add a lot of value here.
Yep.
And I'm choosing to use my value here for now, but that isn't a forever thing. And so it
Mm.
actually does have to be a reciprocal relationship where the ecosystem is caring for those individuals. And so we need more of those people. We need to spread that because those high performers will create more high performers, which create more high performers, which create a lot of good for the company. So
Yes.
when you talk about that ability to bring back your value, but not in a braggart way, how do you talk about that or show that so that you're not, trying to be the best kept secret, but you're also not trying to come in like the Anna show?
Right. So you're saying as the employer, like how do
I
you
would say
manage
the
to?
employee. I want to talk
Okay.
to the employee first about like, yeah, leaders, don't be so scared of this, but let's start with that advice for the employee of how to bring that back in. And then maybe we'll talk back to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think tact, right?
Mm,
Like a lot of tact.
okay.
So
Humility.
yeah, humility. But I've always looked at most of my relationships on some way as being interdependent, right? Because most people outside of their marriage don't have a lot of great interdependent relationships. We have dependent ones and then we have independent ones, but there's not a lot of people that we really need to build something with constructively over a long period of time and deal with their issues and ours, right?
Yeah.
But it happens very much in like our marriage, right? um, so the idea then is how do I make my boss kind of like my business partner, but I would think of myself as the junior partner, right? So there's like a level of respect, but there's also a level of like autonomy and like growth that should happen. Now, this is from the employee side. It's not always reciprocated well because I've had one or two bad bosses and marginal ones, but most good. Um, and they'll respect that. And then it's like when you speak into their goals, and one thing that I never did was I never complained about my boss to other people.
Ooh, great. Good tip. Yep.
Huge. Because and I'd tell my boss like, look, you're doing great, like this is what I think we could do better, or where there's a challenge, but like you're doing great and I just want to let you know I'm super happy to be on the team. And like I would always speak that positive in, not in a brown nosy fake way, but just like, and then maybe have a feedback or question so that it like keeps it honest, right? But being able to use, I think, the Oreo cookie, like positive challenge, positive, right? Like in those conversations. But then just letting them really know like you're in their corner, you're on their team. And when you do that and you come with solutions that might be creative because you like have a new idea, you're in great shape. I think tone is really important to not seem braggy though. So
Okay.
maybe
So
Carrie, you want to add
tone.
on to
Yeah.
tone and how you do it is important. But that's sometimes hard to teach. Like teaching tone in
Yeah.
communication is like I'm sure you see it like with bad
Yeah.
leaders. It's like you
Yeah.
said it right, but like the tone is just wrong. Like
Said the right things, but
How
it's
are
like if
you
I ask
today? Right.
Carrie,
Right.
Carrie, do you want to go see the Marvel movie? Fine. Do you want to go see the Marvel movie? Fine. Like
Yeah.
totally different, right?
Yeah. Tone's big. And you hit on one of my favorite questions, Craig, which is like, what could we be doing better or differently? And
Mm-hmm.
if that one question just started to become the norm between an
Mm,
employee and a
yes.
boss, and to your point,
Love
Craig,
it.
don't wait for your boss to ask, you ask, hey, what could
Mm-hmm.
I be doing better or differently for the team,
So
for the
awesome.
organization? Oh, and by the way, here's what I think we could be doing, and give it back, right? Be part of the solution. Don't sit back and complain in the background. Be part of that solution. I think those are great tips, Craig. What would you add, Carrie?
yeah, one like you hit on just that reciprocity,
Yeah.
right? Of like also asking for feedback, seeking out feedback, being growth oriented in your career as like a real part of your brand is so important.
Yeah.
The other element, like you talked about, Anna, with just why should an employer feel comfortable and excited to have entrepreneurs operating within their
Mm,
company? I mean, I can tell you from my experience in coaching people that an entrepreneur is likely to be a way more energized human form than
Mm.
someone who is exclusively working a 9 to 5 career.
Yep.
And as a culture, if your team in your business is energized and empowered, the only option is like growth, right? And like a positive environment
Yes.
and productive and good relationships. So I think from the employer, it's important not to be fearful either. You know, Craig talked about not fearing your boss or your job, but like don't fear your employees either. And you spoke about like understanding your boss's goal, but like employers, make sure you're actually understanding to some extent the vision of the people that you're employing. I know many business owners who they don't even call them their staff, it's like my team,
Yeah.
right? And they have real interpersonal relationships and really value those people's livelihood, and it just takes on a whole different dimension. And it's a different level of synergy, and you call it interdependence, but also just overall synergy where like people are
Mhm.
really invested in each other and as the, in the broader, you know, business as a whole. But I think that's a huge element from both sides of the equation.
Right. Right. And while I want better leaders, and that's what I spend my time doing, is creating, restoring humanity into our work and our workplaces. I don't want individuals to wait on that, right? Do not wait on your leader to initiate that. Initiate it. And if you're not getting it, keep trying, because
Mhm.
even though that person might be blocking you in some way, there's a lot of ways around that. To your earlier point, Craig, if you're killing it on the day job, cool. Kill it on the day
Yeah.
job and go and make room around them. Go look for a sponsor internally. Go look for a mentor. Do something.
Mhm.
It's not the leader isn't the end all that be all, although they could be a
Mhm.
great help. And they could be leveraging our talents better individually and collectively, whether we have true entrepreneurs or not. Do
Mhm.
it. I love the advice to take that ownership. So what would you say, if you looked at what your book is and if you had just sort of this core message to give to people, what do you want them to hear from you in terms of the benefits of this side hustle and what that could really do for them and their impact?
Gosh, such a beautiful question. Uh, the reason we wrote the book is because we think there are more moderate entrepreneurs out there than they realize.
Yes.
So Carrie talks about this a lot, but entrepreneurship lies on a spectrum. Most of us are not the Elon Musk billionaire. I'm going to build SpaceX. And by the way, I'll do this little Tesla thing. And then, I've got this AI project. Like most of us are not like born with that chip. But
Yeah.
most of us, I don't think we're born to sit in a cube, for 40 years and have one job and be like functional, narrow in scope and ability. And so a side hustle is a really great way to explore who you want to become, how you want to grow, and to create extra income to give you that autonomy and ultimately create the life you want, right? Or the life you visualize. And so, man, we're passionate about that. And we could go on a long tangent about why, but let's just all be honest, having one way to make money is not wise.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a fact, right? Uh,
Yes.
for the vast majority of us, right? Few people need to just be focused on their job because they're struggling. But like for a lot of, if you're doing okay there, like build out. So I think it'll just give people a more meaningful, happy, wholesome life if it's done well.
Yeah.
You want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I personally just don't think progressively building something out is talked about enough in our society, right?
Mm.
Like there's so much power in incremental growth. We
Yes.
didn't do anything super crazy or lightning speed. I mean, we truly didn't, but we were really annoyingly consistent
Yeah.
and just steadily
Mhm.
putting time into building our other outside businesses. And I think people often think extremes, right?
Mhm.
I'm either 100% in my
God,
job
so
or I'm
terrible.
nothing or I'm a front hustler building a startup from the ground up. And frankly, most people misuse the word entrepreneur because what they're thinking is inventor.
Mhm. Right. Right.
And an inventor and an entrepreneur are two very different things. Many entrepreneurs didn't actually invent anything at all.
Yeah.
They're leveraging systems, they're evolving systems, they're playing off existing products or,
Yeah.
services or tools.
They bought a McDonald's.
they purchased a system.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we just really want to open people's minds up to like what are viable options that they have, and just this whole sort of movement that like
Yeah.
there are other possibilities for people, and you likely have a reasonable foundation to start. You'll need to make changes, of course. You'll need to embrace the adventure, of course, but there's a pathway to help you get to where your life vision um, leads. But you got to start with a life vision and then find people to support you, and then do some really good consistent work and incrementally grow. So we hope overall the book just empowers people to be able to do that on their terms.
Yeah. And thank you for talking about incremental growth, right? And experimentation, right? I think that's one of the things as a side hustle for me specifically. I think I shared with you, Carrie, that, it was probably for the last at least 4 years of my time internally where I had a photography business on the side because I had
Yeah.
gotten to the point where I was leading leaders of leaders, right? So I didn't do much work anymore. I didn't create anything of my own. I was sort of pointing and redlining, and
Mhm.
I was like, I need to like do something that I am just responsible for. And I had done enough reflection and maybe enough complaining, to your earlier point, Craig, where it was like, okay, what is the problem though? Like, what are you going to do about it? And that piece, just putting that extra square on my quote for a
Yes.
while, helped me try something out, helped me get that
Mm.
fuel. I didn't want to do photography forever, but guess what? I only
Right.
learned that after trying it. I only
Right.
learned that after trying it, and
Bingo.
it made me better now in what I'm doing, and it made me better then, right? Because it was able to fill this outlet that my job wasn't able to fill at the time. Because guess what? That wasn't my job to be creating, right?
Well,
So
it's not in the job title.
yes,
And it
yes.
can't be. It can't be, right? I mean, it's that rule. I mean, that's the specific box that you're in, right? So
Yeah. And I love it because earlier I wrote down time because I wanted to make sure I talked to you guys about like the pace of not jumping. We don't have to do a side hustle for 3 months, then decide, and then, put our life savings and everyone else's into this new idea, right? This can be something that you just ebb and flow in. And when it feels like too much, take a break from
yes,
something, right?
big
Squeeze
time.
something down because sometimes
Yeah.
often we can't do all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful part is you can ebb and flow, just like you said.
Yeah.
And then it depends a little bit on what you want to create, right? So if you say, oh, I want to be financially independent 5 years from now, okay, well, you might not have a chance to lollygag in the tulips, right?
Mhm.
So I think the life vision should drive that, in terms of your effort and your consistency and whatnot. But one of the things that I think another tip for people who are entrepreneurs is learning how to like shift gears quickly and pivot very fast. And so for me, it was like 5 o'clock hit or 4:45 or whatever. My last client meeting is done. And it's like, I would literally get in my car and I would think like, as I was shifting the gear, because I did not drive I drive an automatic, but like shift from park to reverse, right? I would think like, business owner,
It's go time.
it's go time.
Yeah.
It's like rip off the Clark Kent suit and
Teaching
like
hat.
let's
Yeah.
fly off, right? And
Love
so
it.
I think that is something that's really important. A lot of people aren't good at. Then they're like kind of drift, and it's like an hour or two goes by, right? And then the other thing is you talked about instead of managing time, you specifically said managing energy a lot in our beginning part of our conversation, which is beautiful. I had that section in the book, but I got chopped. Anyways, for me, like I hit those lulls at like 3-4 o'clock. And so that's not when I had the cup of coffee or took like a rhodiola, like green tea extract, like, right. Like that's not when I like took the multivitamins, like, I take it like when I needed it at that 5 o'clock point. Cause that's when I really needed to go because I mean, we were serious about our side hustles too. Like,
Yeah.
I think the reason a lot of people are never successful with the side hustle is because they always treat it like one in their mind.
Mhm.
Right. And so depending on what you want to create, if you just want that like photography, like creative outlet, cool, like just dance and play that game. But if you really want to build something of $1 million, multi-millions in revenue, you got to like think that way. And like, you can't just take days off for no reason just because you're not
Yeah.
feeling it. That's also
Yeah.
partly a challenge. Depends on the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if it's not, and everybody's different, but I do feel like if you're not at least attracted to it, if you're not feeling a pull to it, then maybe you're doing the wrong thing, right? Either in your day, either in your guest or your end, right? If you're really not thinking like, oh, I really want to go work on this side hustle at night, maybe it is the wrong thing, right? Because that did hit me eventually with photography where I was like, okay, I feel like maybe I don't need that creative outlet anymore.
Yeah, I would love to comment on this, and Carrie can riff on this a little bit too. Yes and no. So I think it depends. A lot of people are waiting to build a side hustle because they feel like they don't have something they're passionate about. And I
Okay.
think that is the biggest crock. You don't have to be passionate about a side hustle, just like you don't have to be passionate about a job.
Yeah. But you have
They're
to be committed.
tools. They're tools. They're tools to make
Mm.
income, right? So how we fit that into our life vision is really important, how it plays in. So like for you, the photography thing was a creative outlet. You
Yeah.
maybe wanted to make some money. You got your feet wet in the entrepreneurial game a little bit. So it like worked as that tool, but it wasn't like, hey, I need to replace my job income.
Yeah.
Right? That wasn't the tool per se. At least that's not the way it sounds like it was for you. I
Yeah.
can't project that.
Right.
But in our case, like we wanted to replace our job income so we could be full-time parents and then part-time entrepreneurs and live a life where we can literally customize our day. So as a function of that, we actually went for the most efficient and effective systems to replace our job income. And we were passionate about the results.
Yeah.
And part of the issue is the serial side hustler, serial SERIEL, right? Where it's like hop, 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 hop. That's okay. But if you really want to build something substantial, then you have to push through when you don't feel it.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to, like, there's days now I'm sure where you're like, I don't feel it. You just do it anyways, right? I,
Yes. Right.
I have
Right.
I have a meditation mentor and he's like, Craig, you just need to just meditate. I don't care if you feel like it or not. I don't care if your kids are screaming. It's like, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm being wimpy about this.
That's
So
very what her last name's Cameron. She wrote the classic book, The Artist's Way, right? Where she talks about to
mhm,
artists that you can't just wait for the muse to strike. And this is great. That's a great connection, Craig, back to the entrepreneur of waiting for somebody to hand you something. You have to create it. You got to create the energy. It's a numbers
yep,
game, right? Like
yep,
you got to pitch a bunch of ideas to get a couple through the door, right? So
yep,
it's creating the energy. The Artist Way talks about how you should, if you're a writer, you commit to writing this many words a day or this many pages. I'm going to paint for
right,
this long every day. For
yep,
me, I block on my calendar, this is when I'm going to do business development every week, this is when I'm going to work on the clients, and that's when it gets work done, right? So making
yep.
the commitment.
Yes. And then go a little deeper on that because then people find, well, maybe I don't really want to run a photography business for my way to make income. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But don't sit in corporate world for 40 years and do nothing about it, being like, I wish I was a photographer. I would love running a photography business. And Carrie went through this because she was into photography. And it's like, but then you realize you do it and you're like, well, I don't want to do this to make money. I just want to do it for the art and for the love of it. Two different things, right? But when you don't know that and you're just like blindly going in, you're like, oh, I'm going to run this business. Like, no, go talk to 10 photographers who run businesses and ask them, what is it like? What mistakes did you make? Like, do you like your life? Because a lot of them might be like, God, I wish I just had a day job.
Or what does life even look like
Yeah.
as a photographer, right?
Yeah.
Right. They don't know. Yeah. I'm coaching somebody now who has three, again, they've been in their career for almost 40 years. They've got three options, but because they've been doing the same thing at the said company so long, they're so nervous. And that's where we started, was the who. Go find
Yes.
people that do that. The
Yes.
adjunct
Beautiful.
professor, the this type of coach, the this. Go find and talk to them, and not just one, because you're only getting one view, right? You need to talk to
Yes.
multiple people, and then you need to put that puzzle together for yourself that says like, all right, I'm going to try this, and you're going to try it.
Mhm.
You're going to see how that feels. You're going to try it on. You're going to be committed, to your point, Craig. I'm going to try it for this long in this way, and then I'm going to
Mhm.
assess, like a scientist. I had a
Mhm.
hypothesis. Was I correct or not? And where do I need to adjust the formula?
Beautiful. Yep.
All right.
Well, and one thing that I'll add in terms of passion, I can really parallel that to motivation because there's plenty of days that people aren't motivated to go to their job, but they go.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about motivation, especially as a side hustler, is first off, you have to have a business owner mentality to run a business. You can't apply that like employee, I'm just going to wait for things to be given to me, given the project to slide across my desk, right? And that's why so many side hustlers fail.
Mhm. That's why so
Is
many
because they're
entrepreneurs fail too.
yeah, because they're trying to use an employee mentality in the business space, and the joke's on them then, because they're the boss, right? And
Mhm.
so motivation is interesting in the sense that you don't always have to have it to start. Motivation builds and it evolves and it snowballs as you actually engage in the work of performing and growing new skills and realizing, oh man, like I can actually do this and I can create wins. So I caution people not to wait for motivation before they take that first step into entrepreneurship. Take the step because it makes practical sense with like what your life vision is and how that might actually play in and feed that.
I can
Leveraging a
just
business.
picture
Oh,
that like
sorry.
energy literally swirling and building. I think you hit it, Carrie, right? Like that like begets like. So when you say,
Mhm.
I'm curious and I'm open to the whatever this, wherever this takes me, right? And we often can't, I did not think that I would be doing this. I did not think that I would go out on my own. My twins were 5. Now they just turned
Oh
10.
boy.
I could not have predicted that, right? But by exploring, right, my last 2 years
Yes.
in-house, I had turned down a chief human capital officer job finally, but I 2
Mhm.
years I struggled and I didn't know, should I take it, should I not? And I was really honest with them, but I talked to everybody and their brother about everything. And then finally, the one thing that I hadn't explored was like, yoo-hoo, over here. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go out on my own now, right? So being open to whatever your best next is, and that
Mhm.
energy will create it. I loved what you said, right? That employee mentality. And guys, I'm hoping that from this, when we have a side hustle, our employee mentality goes down and our ownership mentality goes up, right? That we are saying, I am reclaiming the ownership of my time, my talents, my voice, and wherever I choose to use them, whether it's in my day job or a side hustle or a hobby or whatever, I'm going to do it with maximum impact.
And I'll just chime in with one more thought back to sort of this unity or relatability with your employer is when you actually adopt a business owner mindset with your side hustle, you ultimately start to understand your boss.
Yes.
And there's this very interesting shift and like you're almost on the same team versus this like top down relationship because you like get it, you understand their investment and their stake in growth. And I think you just become a team player in a different way because you see the other side of the coin very clearly.
Yeah, like you said earlier, Craig, that I'm envisioning them as the senior partner in a consulting firm and me as the
Yeah.
junior partner.
Yeah.
Do that with whatever you do, right? Because then we're going to just leave our mark. Like I say to my dad, I'm not going out like a punk, right? I'm going to like do my very best with whatever I commit to so that we can maximize and then we gain so much more in return. And you guys are just an excellent example of what that can do when you focus your motivation, you're disciplined in your action, and you have something in mind, that like life set, right? That life
Yeah.
vision.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want us to talk briefly about the benefits for the employers? Or do
Yeah,
you
I
want to,
mean, we
or
do you have a
are we
hard
done?
do you have a hard stop in 2 minutes?
Is it 10?
I have to jump on a board
Oh,
meeting in a few,
oh yeah,
but
no problem.
let me do this. Let's can you give one quick comment for that, and then I want to make sure we have time to plug your things.
Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay,
So,
great.
benefits to the employer real quick. Number one, if you have employees that are side hustling, they don't feel the pressure that they need everything from their job. They might not even care as much about the income, right? What they want is flexibility and trust. And if they're performing in their job and they're good and their portfolio, their client, or their actual work quality is high, give them that flexibility as long as it's not conflicting or they're like creating ethical issues, right?
Mhm.
Then what happens is they'll start to develop more skills, which helps your ecosystem. They'll develop more ownership. They'll have less fear coming into the office, and it creates an environment where everybody is like winning essentially. Now, if you lead, if you can't lead that which with that you fear, right?
Yes.
So if you're always afraid, well, I'm going to lose this person, you have to have the confidence that you'll replace them. And if you do well by them, hopefully they'll refer people to the position and it'll work out
Yes.
okay. But you can't be so uh, limited in mindset, so
Yes.
small thinking that like you want to limit their ability to have a better life because you're worried they're going to do something on the side. So
Yeah.
those
It's
are
like
just a couple
bees.
top.
It's bees, dogs, and employees can smell fear, right? Where we're like, if you are managing me with fear, and that's what high performers, when you are a high performer, that leader might want to hold on to you, but that's up to you then to be creating that space and that boundaries and not to like totally take their hand off of you, but just gently like, I got this, right? I'm going to do a good
Right.
job over here. It's going to be my yes end. And this is my career. I'm
Yeah.
in control here. I think that is the message. And I love what you guys are doing with all of your work. Where can we find more? Where can we get connected with you and all the lovely things you're doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So you want to start a side hustle is on Amazon. It will be on all the major retailers. It comes out officially June 8th.
Yep.
Our website is tandemconsulting.co. We do a lot of content creation on Instagram and on LinkedIn. You can find us just by our names. On Instagram, it's tandem.consulting. So yeah, reach out. We'd love to support people. And the whole goal for us is impact and empowerment. And we really appreciate you having us on, Anna. If you could tell, we love this topic.
Yeah.
So thanks for winding us up.
Yeah.
I
Thanks for getting us
know
all
we've got
excited.
really
We're
nice
jazzed for our day.
complementary. Yeah. Nice
Yeah.
complementary sides to what you're doing. It goes with my theme of like double down and try a lot of things before you jump in, right? Really
Yes.
leverage your yes and your end, and you'll really be successful. So I can imagine you guys coming into an employer and giving a talk, right? And really trying to get people to think differently. It is a gig economy. I feel like because of what happened in 2020, both from the pandemic to the racial and social injustice, has awakened a new level of desire for ownership in people. So I think employers are going to have to get better at this. Individuals are going to get better at owning,
Yes.
and we're going to see like better work, better life because of it.
It's not going away, and it's only if we're embraced it or not. So thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Oh
it.
yes.
you.
Thank you guys. Peace and progress.